I'm a low-tech guy, so you know, my natural habitat, I'd be using a blackboard and chalk, but this is pretty advanced, but I'll try my best. Thank you very much to the committee. I really appreciate this. Great honor. Let me just start off with a note of humility, and I'm echoing a little bit some of what's been said already. I think in the same way that students learn in a variety of different ways, I think teachers teach in a variety of different ways, and I don't think that there is one best way for everyone to teach. I think what we do is, over time, we do a lot of, I'll speak for myself, over time I've done a lot of trial and error, done a lot of learning by doing. I think we all develop styles and strategies that feel appropriate to us, feel comfortable to us, and hopefully some learning comes out of that. But I think occasions like this are important. They're useful because they give us a chance to compare notes with our colleagues and maybe get some new ideas, so that's great. I think what I really want to do, since the time is limited, I'll spend most of my time just talking about one particular course that I especially enjoy doing, and I'll tell you why I enjoy it and why it's organized the way it is. That's a course that I do at the third-year level. It's an elective called Comparative Economic Institutions. And the way the course is organized is that I have a set of 4 books that I really like. One's by a couple of anthropologists, one's by a political scientist, actually also an economist. She got the Nobel Prize in Economics a few years ago, Eleanor Ostrom, but she started off in political science. Let's see what else, a book by a law professor, and then there is finally at the end one about economics. What I do is I've chosen books where there's a lot of very detailed, descriptive case study material about small-scale societies, small-scale communities, where people have a variety of economic problems that they're trying to solve, and they've developed over time, perhaps over centuries, institutions of various sorts to solve the economic problems that they face. And so I have the students read all of this case study material that doesn't superficially look like economics at all. And then my job is to come in the lectures and talk a little bit about the readings, but also start constructing pretty simple little models from economics, employing a few concepts here and there, where we do a little algebra, we do some graphs. And before you know it, we've kind of constructed a model that seems to maybe be useful in explaining what it is people are doing in these small-scale societies, small-scale communities. And so the goal is to, well, multiple goals, but one goal is to get them to see that economics can be applied to a wide range of things where they might never have imagined it could be applied before, so that's good. Try to convince them of that, but also motivate the teaching of the theory through real-world observations, right? So we're seeing what real people are doing in real communities, and they have real problems they're trying to solve, and so we're trying to then develop the theory on that foundation. And this is very different from the way economic theory is normally taught. I mean, normally when we're teaching a theory course, I do some courses like this, you have a textbook. Right? Well, how do we know that the stuff in the textbook is true? Well, the author said so. How do we know, what's another way we know it's true? Well, the instructor assigned it. So we have a textbook, chapter 1 comes first, then you master that, and then you go to chapter 2 and so forth. And most of the time in economics, there's very little motivation in terms of what's really going on in the world that we're trying to explain. So this course, it kind of reverses all of that and says, let's start with the stuff we're trying to explain. Let's build the theory explicitly in order to do that. And then by the end, I mean, it's a very sneaky way of teaching theory, right? And so by the end of the course, in December or whatever it is, they walk out the door. They've actually learned quite a bit of economic theory, but they kind of got it in this relatively painless, non-abstract kind of way, but they learned it. And so I really enjoy that course. One of the things I get to do with that course is to convey to them that there are usually multiple potential explanations for what's going on. If you observe something in the world, well, it might be hypothesis A, there might be hypothesis B, C, who knows. And how do we use logic and evidence to try to figure out what's a reasonable explanation for what's going on? So I'm trying to model for them the mindset and the activities of a social science researcher. Right? So the idea is we're not memorizing textbook stuff. What we're trying to do is explain things. and we're going to think about this in the way that a real social scientist might think about it, who doesn't start off knowing the correct answer. We don't know. But we might have some ideas. Okay, well, so if hypothesis one was correct, well, then certain other things ought to be observable. Do we observe those things and so on? So I do a lot of that in that course, and I also do it in some 400 level courses. I've got a couple of writing intensive courses at the 400 level, which are kind of about, similar big picture kinds of questions. I've got one on economic prehistory, which I'm doing now. So we talk about, what was it like being a hunter-gatherer in the Upper Paleolithic, and how is it that people got from being foragers to being farmers? Why would they make that transition? Where do things like institutional things like inequality, warfare, the state come from? How did we get that stuff? So I really like these courses that are about big, messy, complicated, historical, institutional kinds of things where there's no obvious, immediate explanation for why some of these things happened. There are often competing theoretical perspectives. There's often, fights going on between various scholars. This is the answer, no, that's the answer. And I find the students seem to find that really refreshing, right? They by and large, at least the students that I get, have not previously been exposed, for the most part, to the idea that there are actually controversies among scholars. There are controversies in research. And it takes a certain amount of detective work and logic and evidence to try to figure out, which of these things makes more sense, which of these things makes less sense. And, sometimes even the instructor doesn't know, right? Sometimes the instructor is not sure. That's a revelation to a lot of students, right? And so along the way in some of these courses, I'll try to assign some of my own publications on the origins of inequality or whatever, and I'll say, well, this is kind of how I got to this particular hypothesis. Might be right, might not be. Here are what I see as the strengths and weaknesses in my own research. Here are what I see as some of the limitations on what we're doing. But on the whole, this is why I thought this was a reasonable way to approach this problem. So I do a lot of that, trying to model for my students what real social science research looks like. I guess just to kind of wrap this up, how do I feel at the end of a semester whether I've done a good job or not? I guess when I'm looking at teaching evaluations and talking to students, I have a few criteria for myself. One is, do I think I've successfully convinced them that economics has broad applicability to a wide range of things? If they seem to have gotten that message, I think that's good. Have they gotten the message that knowledge is not some kind of sacred thing that can't be questioned, that, yeah, you can, there's conventional wisdom, you can question it. If you've got logic, if you've got evidence, great, go question it. If they seem to have gotten that message, I think that's good. And just kind of in general, try to convince them that the world is sort of a big, complicated place, but it's kind of interesting, and there is the possibility of actually understanding it. That's it.